And in this breath, come back to yourself. Let your body remember that you get to arrive as you are. You can arrive unfinished. You can arrive uncertain. You can arrive with a little tenderness around the edges, or a little static in the system, or a whole committee meeting happening in your head. If you manage to arrive fully centered, deeply grounded, emotionally regulated, and entirely ready for transformation, please find me after the service because I have questions. Today, you can just arrive. We are living in a time when bracing can feel easier than opening. It can feel easier to move quickly to conclusions, easier to cling to what we already think we know, easier sometimes to confuse certainty with safety. And I get it. Truly, there's a lot in the world right now that can make a person want to tighten up. We can feel the urge to become more efficient, more defended, more resolved, to move through life with the emotional equivalent of your shoulders or up near your ears. We know the posture is very familiar. It's not very comfortable. It's exhausting. It doesn't leave us much room to breathe. Beneath all of that, curiosity still lives, quietly, persistently, like a little tug, a pause, a small shift in the spirit, a sense that there may be more here than we first understood, a sense that the story is still unfolding, that maybe we are still becoming. Part of what we're doing together this morning is noticing that something in our lives, in our communities, and even in ourselves is at a new beginning. Something beautiful may be beginning. A little while ago, I caught myself having a very quick reaction to something. You know, the kind where your mind moves really fast and your opinion is certain. Oh, I know what this is. I know what this means. I already know exactly how I feel about this. The whole story was already written and everyone had their assigned roles. And to be honest, I noticed it happening. I could feel myself moving toward a conclusion before I had really stayed with the moment at all. Then something quieter seemed to surface underneath. A small pause, a little opening. Something in me asked, what if there's more here? It was a tiny moment. There wasn't the John Williams soundtrack build up, no sudden beam of spiritual light. I didn't instantly become wiser or kinder or more evolved. I just paused long enough to get curious. And that little shift changed the moment. It made more room for complexity, for grace, a little more room for the possibility that my first reaction is only the beginning of the story rather than the whole of it. I keep thinking about how often curiosity works exactly like that. It's rarely a grand revelation or sweeping transformation. Curiosity often begins as a pause we almost miss, a tiny opening in a moment when we could have stayed closed. The willingness to let a question breathe before we rush to answer it. That, to me, is holy. Curiosity is more than a personality trait. It should be something we admire in children and make room for in adults. Curiosity is necessary for the soul to stay alive. It is one of the ways we remain open to revelation, open to one another, open to transformation, to the possibility that love still has more to teach us. Unitarian Universalism is built for this kind of spaciousness. Ours is a living tradition. We speak of ongoing revelation because we trust that wisdom is still unfolding. We trust that truth is often larger than any one person, any one doctrine, or one generation can hold on its own. We trust that the work of becoming more loving, more just, more awake is a practice we return to again and again. That is one of the reasons I love this faith. It leaves room for growth. It allows room for complexity, for humility. It embraces the possibility that there is always more to learn, more to unlearn, more to notice, to repair, to imagine. We gather together because we are still growing. We gather together because we are still learning. Because if any of us had this fully figured out, this would be a very different kind of world, a very different kind of faith community. Curiosity is a part of how we live into that. It keeps our faith from becoming brittle, our community from shrinking into sameness, keeps love from becoming shallow. And we can find it in our shared values. Curiosity helps us live into transformation. Change usually begins with a question, a willingness to notice that something in us or around us is asking for more life. And curiosity helps us live into pluralism. Honoring many truths requires enough humility to know that our own perspective is merely a part of the picture rather than the whole canvas. Curiosity helps us live into interdependence. It reminds us that we need each other. We need each other's stories, each other's wisdom, each other's ways of understanding the world. And at the center of it all is love as that living force that asks more of us than fear ever could. I think sometimes people imagine spiritual maturity as becoming more solid, more finished, more sure of ourselves. And some of that is true. But I hope as we grow, we become more grounded. I hope we become less easily thrown around by every passing thing. And I believe spiritual depth asks for something tender too. The capacity to stay open without falling apart. To stay teachable without disappearing. To remain grounded enough that a new question does not feel like a threat. To let complexity exist without immediately trying to flatten it. That kind of steadiness takes practice. There are times and places where people are under enormous pressure to become smaller, quieter, more guarded, more self-protected. In these moments, curiosity can become a kind of spiritual steadiness, a steady refusal to let fear have the final word about who we are, how we love, and whether we remain open to each other's humanity. In a world that moves quickly and so often rewards speed over depth, curiosity helps us reclaim spaciousness. Our lives are meant for more than reaction. Our spirits need room for reflection. There is still room for imagination, still room for surprise, for becoming transformed. Either way, curiosity helps us stay interconnected, and that shapes our individual lives and our life together. Every interdependent community needs practices that help us remain open to one another. Curiosity is one of those practices. It helps us resist the temptation to reduce each other to first impressions, easy categories, old stories, or neat roles. It reminds us that there's always more to a person than what we know at first glance, more to a community than what appears on the surface, more unfolding in a life than what can be known from the outside. Curiosity lets us ask better questions. Instead of, what's wrong with you? We can ask, what has shaped you? Instead of, how do I win this moment? We can ask, what is needed here? Instead of, how quickly can I decide what this means? We can ask, what might I be missing? This shift changes the whole atmosphere of our relationships. It changes how people experience us. It changes whether they feel managed or met, whether they feel like a problem to be solved or a person to be known. There are times for boundaries. There are times for clarity. There are times when love sounds a lot less like wondering and a lot more like telling the truth plainly. And curiosity holds all of that because curiosity deepens conviction. It keeps conviction from becoming cruelty. It keeps our values from becoming weapons. Curiosity says, I know what I value and I'm still willing to learn. I can be rooted and still open. I can honor my own humanity while making room for yours. That kind of curiosity is spiritual discipline. It is one of the ways we practice being a people shaped by love rather than by fear. And it is also, I think, one of the ways transformation begins. Which brings me to the image at the center of my message, a seed. Curiosity is so often seed-sized. It arrives small, quiet, easy to overlook, A question, a nudge, a moment when something in us says, wait, there might be more here. That's how a lot of important things begin. A seed does not look like much. It looks small, quiet, unfinished. If you judged it only by its surface, you might miss its power entirely. It seems so ordinary. And yet, inside of it is life. Inside of it is possibility, a future taking shape. Curiosity is like that. It plants something before we know what it will become. A question can rest in the soil of a life for a long time before becoming anything visible. At first, we may have no idea whether what is growing is courage, honesty, grief, joy. I closed it. That's fine.
Bravery.
Thank you. Here we go. Healing. A deeper sense of self or a deeper sense of purpose. We may have no idea whether the question is inviting us toward rest or change, release or commitment, or some entirely new way of imagining our lives. We just know that something has begun to stir. Some things grow because we tend them. A seed needs attention more than control. It needs conditions that allow life to emerge. Soil, water, light, time. Curiosity needs tending too. It needs enough spaciousness to ask a real question, enough humility to admit we do not yet know, tenderness and trust to let something honest rise toward the light. That is true in a person, and it is true in a congregation. In community, curiosity can become the soil where trust deepens, relationships mature, and imaginations expand. Love can be the sunlight. Shared practice can be the water. And over time, something begins to bloom that no one could have manufactured by force. Transformation is rarely as glamorous as we want it to be. We love stories where everything changes all at once. There's dramatic clarity. The next right thing appears with a chime and a beam. We know that's not how it goes. Most of the transformations that matter are much slower than that, quieter, more ordinary, more hidden. Transformation looks like finally finding the courage to ask the question you've been avoiding. It looks like loosening your grip on an old certainty, becoming a little less reactive, making enough room in yourself for another person to surprise you, staying open when it would feel easier to close, making just enough room for wonder to survive. Certainly less flashy, but it's authentic and it's enough. Sometimes it looks like choosing openness when everything around us pushes urgency, like following a question into territory we have never explored before, like letting wonder widen what we thought was possible. Sometimes it looks like trusting that even in unlikely places, something can bloom. Notice where curiosity is trying to grow something in us and meet that growth with care. Gently ask yourself, where is curiosity already alive in me? Where is it actually quietly already present? What question has been lingering? What possibility keeps tapping at the edge of my awareness? What part of my life is still unfolding? Maybe it's personal, your own healing, your own joy, your own tiredness, your own call. Maybe it lives in a relationship or in your spiritual life or in what this community is becoming. Maybe it lives in what the wider world is asking of people who still believe in love, justice, and human dignity. You get to let those questions breathe. You get to let them unfold without turning every meaningful question into a plan by this afternoon. Thanks to be to whatever is holy, because that sounds exhausting. Some questions are meant to be accompanied. No seed is meant to be dug up every 15 minutes so we can check whether we're doing enough. They're meant to be trusted, tended, given what they need, and allowed to grow. That too is a spiritual practice. To trust that everything meaningful has its own rhythm, that some of the most important growth is hidden for a while. that curiosity is a way of paying attention, that wonder is wise, that openness is courageous, to trust that staying tender in a hard world is a form of courage. This is one of the best gifts curiosity offers us right now. It helps us remain human. It helps us remain relational, capable of surprise, of compassion, capable of change. It reminds us that our lives are still unfolding, our communities are still becoming, love is still alive, revelation is still possible. Something beautiful may be beginning, even when we can only sense its first green edge beneath the soil. It's an invitation to become a little more curious, a little more willing to lean in when something in you says, wait, there may be more here. To stay with a question long enough for it to teach you something. To let yourself be surprised, even if being surprised is currently nowhere near the top of your list of preferred spiritual experiences. A little more willing to trust that curiosity grows. Let's take one more breath together. Remind yourself that you are here. You are alive. Your life is still unfolding. As I finish, I offer this blessing. May curiosity meet you where you are. May wonder widen what you thought possible. May you have just enough courage to follow the what if a little further. Something is already growing, even if you cannot quite see it yet. Something beautiful may be beginning. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.
So please join me in our closing hymn number 396. I know this rose will open. It's normally a round, but we're just going to sing it through 3 times, okay?